In honor of our time, I really want us to practice some things here. And maybe, John, can you help me pass out some things while I explain it when we're passing it out? What I will do is this image, and I know lots of people had asked about or taken a picture. I actually printed out a bunch of these as well, of this. So if you want that, that's fine. And then, John, will you also pass this out to them as well? Or get some up. There you go. Help them earn his keep. So I want to move us to the application of how we do this. And the question came up, you know, it's fine, it's a challenge, but what causes us to be stuck? Well, basic change management works like this. First thing that has to happen at your parish is an awareness that there's a problem in the first place. Now, most parishes, if we're being truthful, already have that. They know there's a problem. I'm not sure we'd be in agreement on what the exact problem is, but most people in most parishes, even parishioners, know something's not right because they're looking out at the pews on Sunday and they know that the people sitting in the pews, there's more and more people with the hair color of wisdom, right? How's that for politically correct? And so they understand at the eyeball, and everybody's got their opinions as to why it is. So, but there's got to be an awareness of it. We got that down in most places. Crisis will do that for you, right? Being at 20%. There's got to be a desire to support the change. My experience is that in many parishes, there is a mental desire. I don't know that there's a true desire because people aren't real sure what that means, right? Or there's a desire to change as long as you don't change what I like, right? And so what tends to happen at parishes is we talk about change a lot. We talk about the awareness piece a lot. We ask the diocese to bring in these speaker dudes to come in and solve all the world's problems, right? A lot. But the desire, that goes back to that part of, are you willing to become Eucharist? That whole, now you're getting into that desire. How much do you desire it, right? And here's what I'm always encouraging in parishes. Lots of parishes ask the question, what do we need to add in order to get all these people? I'm going to flip that question and ask you, what are you willing to subtract? You know, the Lord pruned the vines for a reason. And nobody wants to prune anything, especially if it's mine. Well, if it's not producing fruit, which in our case is the multiplication of the harvest, if it's not producing fruit, why are we still doing it? And do you have the courage to say that? Because if you do, Bethel's going to be mad at you, right, or whatever, right? Or people are going to say things. So there's the desire. But then some of the desire is immediately contained in the knowledge of how to do it. And this is where I tell my brothers, cut yourself some slack. Nobody taught you this. They taught you, they trained you well, hopefully, on the theology, and they trained you well on sacramental, they trained you well on pastoral. But I said, Brendan, how much did they train you on the leadership and management side of ministry? How much did they teach you about how do you get 10 people in a program to become 50 people? And do you know the steps that it takes to do that? And he said, I'm not even sure I understand what you're talking about right now. I said, so that would be a no. So this is what I want to practice with you. Let's be honest, we're not going to be able to cover all this in this short amount of time. But I do want you, this is why I want some practice time here. Because I want to show you some of the knowledge, basic steps that you can do and your team can do in order to change. The second or the third and the fourth part really is what we do. I mean, we can help you with the desire. The desire is all about advocacy and catechesis. You got to educate your people about why there's a better model. This is where using the church as, this is what the church has been telling us to do. Those are the first steps you got to start with. But the knowledge and the ability and then walking with people to go try that. I'm going to sit and I'm going to come to your meeting and I want to watch this meeting and I want to see the dialogue and then that's what a coach does, right? And so we're going to practice some of this today. And then the reinforcement is you got to keep doing it, which is back to the same question. Every year come back to structure, process and skills. And so it's reinforcement that is working in affirmation, and get into all those other things. So when people are talking about, they all need to be studying the catechism, or they all need to be in adoration, or they all need to be out doing a mission trip. Okay, they all don't need to be doing the same thing as the first thing I'm going to tell you. That's the first step, right? And from your days of training when you were in, and keep doing that cycle, that middle cycle, the way I explained to some people is, that'd be like you having your favorite class in seminary and wanting to repeat the same class. Right? Isn't that basically what we do with a lot of our programs? We just let them stay there. All these Bible studies, when they keep doing them, sure they'll change the book, but they're basically just keeping the same. That's like you, would your rector, wherever you went to seminary, or wherever you got trained as a deacon, would they ever allow that? Of course not, because there's more to be learned, there's more to practice, and there's more to do. That's what we're doing through all of formation. So take what you already know from your formation and let's apply it to the parish. Okay? So here's how we're going to do this. I want to show it to you, and then we're going to literally do it. I'm going to let you work on your parish, whatever your local reality is. What you have before you is what we use with every single parish in the very first phase of full coaching. And what we do is we ask every single parish and school, if you have one, to map out every single thing that you do as an organization. Everything. Every picnic, every fish fry, every Bible study, every small group, every liturgy, all your choirs, everything you do as an organization. That includes the school, the athletics, everything. Now, that's a tiring process. Yes. But the fruit of that work is enormous. It's a tool that will help you convince people why you're stuck. And more frankly, it's a tool that will show you why you're stuck at your parish. I can't tell you why you're stuck at your parish. I don't know your parish. I haven't been to your parish. I could tell you general patterns, but every parish is different. And so what we do, this is what it looks like, and this is a real parish that we did. I abbreviated because I was having a hard time getting it all to fit. When we coach parishes, this is a 6-foot board, just so you know. So you're getting the Cliff Note version of it. It looks like this. This is a real parish that we coached, and we mapped out their entire parish. And so you can see, first of all, let me explain it. So the categories across the top come right out of our church documents. They're clearly defined in the youth ministry document called Renewing the Vision. It was then reiterated in the area of the National Directory of Catechesis, which I was a part of writing back in 90, it came out in 98, actually was written in about 95. And it's in Sons and Daughters of Light for young adult ministry, and so all of these threads, Renewing the Vision is the only one to actually call it a category, okay? But these is what, and there's a lot of research, if you don't know anything about Renewing the Vision in youth ministry and how it was created originally back in 1976, there's a lot of developmental research that's involved in that document that came from Minneapolis in the Search Institute. And this is what the church defines, in order to help somebody fully develop as a disciple, we have to be addressing all 8 of these categories. Okay? So that's what those are. Down the side is a little bit of, and this is my take on it, but if you've read Sherry Riddell's work, this will look a little familiar to you. The actives, what I call the moderates and the uninvolved. The actives are all the people in your parishes you know. They're the 20% who would have been standing up. They're involved in everything. They're volunteering for everything. They're paying for everything, right? You know who these people are. Even if you can't remember their name, you still know who they are, right? The moderates are all those folks who we see, they're around, but they're not what you would call engaged in the parish. So classic cases of this, especially when you look at families, is a lot of our Catholic school families who are in our Catholic schools, but you don't see them on Sunday. A lot of religious ed families. They're in religious ed, but they're not coming on Sunday. They're certainly not signing up for pastoral counsel or anything like that. But they are around. You know who they are. They're not strangers. You probably know less about them. There's not a hard and fast, rule of how often they're coming to church, but they are coming to church at least on occasion. Your uninvolved are the people that would have been sitting. They're registered in your parish. We're not talking about people who are not your parishioners. They're in your parish, they're on your database, but they are not involved in anything. They are not in your religious ed programs. They are not in your school. They are not coming to Mass. If they come to Mass, it's maybe Christmas and Easter, though there's a large portion of our registered parishioners who don't even do that, but more who do come, we know that. And they do come, weddings, funerals, baptisms, they're around our church. That's the profile of the inactives, okay? So what we do is we say, give me the name of your parish. Where are you at? Or pick one if you got 7 of them. Sacred Heart, okay. So at Sacred Heart Parish, what we would do is we would say with you and your team, this is not a father, you should do this job, by the way. And your councils, it was brought up earlier, not everyone has a staff. Absolutely, I agree. Councils and leadership can all do this, lay leadership. You don't have to have a staff to do anything we've talked about, okay? But you would sit down and you'd start mapping everything out. And the quickest way to do it is to take your time talent sheet that you ask everyone to sign up for and start with that, because that's about 80% of the stuff that's on your calendar. Then the second thing you do is you take your calendar and see what's missing, right? And then you always have to get those offshoot ministries to make sure they're accounted for. And that's how you map things out. But what we would say is at Sacred Heart, wow, that's a little blurry. Take your ministries and not put them on there. Who's invited? Well, we know everybody's invited to everything, right? The reality is all of your ministries are not for everybody. They're just not. Everybody's invited, but they're not for everybody. You know who you've really invited, whether explicitly or implicitly, by who's coming. Tells you who you're targeting, right? Because who you're targeting is who's hearing the message that applies to them, okay? So in this case, advocacy, I should never make assumptions. You know what all these categories are. Advocacy is a structure, a systematic way of knowing what the needs of the people are. Advocacy, as you know what advocacy is, to speak on behalf of another, to advocate for, to be aware and to raise up the issues in our community that need to be raised. Do you have a systematic way of doing that and addressing those issues, whether they be pastoral in nature or life issues or theological issues or whatever it is, right? Catechesis, I'm assuming you all know what that is. Community life is a way of forming community in all of its forms at all of its ages. Evangelization, I'm assuming you know. Social justice, by the way, it's charity and social justice is the way it's written in the document. Rich's bias is about to come out. I put social justice up there. One, because it all doesn't fit in a box and I have to make this fit on a slide. But two, if I have to pick between the two, I pick social justice because most parishes are doing a ton of charity, right? Charity is you're in need of food, clothing, shelter, and I'm going to respond. Social justice is changing the systems and structures that are causing you to always be in need. And we're called to do both, and most parishes address the first and not the second. So I'll just let you know. But it technically is both in that category. Leadership development in all of its forms, pastoral care, you know, and then prayer and worship. And again, for you in this audience, I don't have to explain most of those categories. So what you do at Sacred Heart is you'd say, okay, well, let's start going through it. So we have religious education. Who's going to religious education, right? Well, we have. So some of these things you may or may not know. CLOW is Children's Liturgy of the Word. I'm not going to type it all in there, but that's what that is. This particular parish does the Children's Liturgy of the Word. And they did it for ages 0 to 5 because after 5, you're not supposed to be in that. You're supposed to be in Mass. Fine. They happen to have a Catholic school, faith formation. Now, again, to get it to fit on the slide here, I abbreviated some of those things, but we actually spell out a little bit more of what's going on in those programs in the big 6-foot board. There's marriage prep, and again, the only reason that they put it between 18 and 30, it's not because there's not people who aren't older than 30 that are getting married. It's just in general, that's basically who's getting married, right? What we say is as much as possible, first of all, you have to be truthful on this document. And as much as possible, try to be very specific about your ages and your category. It is not uncommon that sometimes topics have to go into more than one box north-south. They cannot go into more than one box east-west. Okay? Does that make sense? Because sometimes like some of our older folks, there's multiple age groups here, and at some point you just got to break it off. So we'd fill all this out, and we go through and we fill out, and all of these, some of you, especially in the back, probably can't see it, but they have a home care, they have bereavement ministry, anointings, prayer shawl ministry, nursing. There's a lot of pastoral care stuff going on over there, is what all this stuff is. That says Catholic School of Faith Formation, because this, like I said, this particular parish does have a Catholic school, okay? And they have athletics and everything else. Now, I know that you may not be able to see this and read this, but I just want you, what is your first impression of this chart? This is a real parish that was a client of ours.
The active people are doing most of the stuff.
Most of the stuff is targeting the active people. You're correct. What else?
Can I ask for a clarification?
Yep.
Under the uninvolved,
Yep.
we've got a few items. Under social justice for sure, and under pastoral care. Is that the parish taking it to them whether they ask for it or not? Because they're not active parishioners.
That's whether you're aware of it or not, you actually got about 2 or 3 different issues there, which is why I like this version of this map. So, first question. The parish determined that the people who use the food pantry are the uninvolved. Now think about that. So that's the first statement. The way they filled out the map in the technical sense was who's coming. Now, some parishes have actually done it different colors, especially if they have a type A on their leadership team. They're going to want different colors. But which there's a value to. In that particular one color would be who we're serving, one color would be who's doing the serving. Because that is a little different category, right? Again, you do whatever you want to do. It's your project, right? But that was what I had also noticed. I said, so you're trying to tell me that nobody who goes to church comes to the food pantry? And I could look at that in about 7 different ways, right? Like, first of all, are you sure about that? And 2, if that's the case, how come all these people that are coming to the food pantry aren't coming to your church? So here's a classic example of that. I'll change the name in case any of you are from the Chicagoland area. So this parish I was working with in the Chicagoland area built a gorgeous food pantry. Awesome. And stand up, I will applaud them. They did an amazing job, raised all this money. It is their thing on what we do really well. They talk about the food pantry. It was over $1 million project to basically build a grocery store for all intensive purposes at their property. And they have a couple hundred people that come through every single week. Kudos to them. My hat's off. Way to be. But I wouldn't be a good coach if I didn't give them a good swift kick in the backside, right? And I said, so yeah, all these people coming in. I said, that's awesome. So how many of those people are, they got all these kids. They have a daycare. They have a daycare corner in a room while the mom, which I think is amazing. That's fantastic. Fantastic. Absolutely. I said, how many of those kids are like, they're all in your programs, right? Are they registered? Well, no. I said, well, when they check out and they get their little bag of, 2 soups, 2 boxes or whatever, right? And you go around. And I said, you put a registration form in there for religious ed, right? No. Well, no. Well, that's all right. So you could do that. You could figure that one. And I said, but either way, at least they get the bulletin in the bag, right? No. Well, when you're doing your fundraiser, I mean, I see the big poster and then you're doing the big fundraiser, right? And it's a big raffle and $50,000 and $100,000 was the first prize, $100,000. Oh, awesome. I said, so like that month, does everybody who comes to the food pantry, they all get a free ticket, right? Because $100,000 would be an amazing, like if they won it, I mean, that would do remarkable things for them, right? No. See what I'm saying by sometimes the opportunities are literally in front of your face and you don't even see it. So I found that interesting as well. Any other observations? Yeah.
Pretty thin on advocacy and evangelization.
Now come on, we have a new evangelization. Do we need a new evangelization? Is that what we need?
Or maybe just the old one put up there.
Yeah, because it really, right? It's just, let's just come at it from a different way. That's really all the new evangelization is, right? But yet, when you really comes down to it, see, because people, now some of the parishes, when I'm doing coaching, this is where we have to push back a little bit. Well, no, we're doing things, and we send letters and everything. Now, clarification on the most basic level. Evangelization is not what do we need to do to get them to come to us. That is not what evangelization is. Evangelization is what do we need to do to go to them. The evangelist goes out, not waits for them to come in. So when you have to say, how are we forming people, training people to go and truly be missional and evangelize, to proclaim the good news, most parishes actually, they don't have much to show for it. And like you said, a lot of the uninvolved, and there's just not much. So if the people who are up here in the 25%, or it's all the look at all the opportunities and ministries, and everybody's complaining that there's no, new council members. But you know what? There's no way to bring new council members because you don't even have a training program to groom the next level. Oh, maybe we need to look at our leadership structures as well. How do we apprentice people to become the next generation of leaders? Right? This is why this chart is so important. And it's you, now this is the adult learner. If you don't know anything about adult learning, I'm going to give you a little tip. An adult learner needs to come to the understanding on their own, which is why we use this chart. I can't tell you what's wrong with your parish. You have to tell yourself what's wrong with this parish. And you do that by saying, this is what we honestly are doing and who we're honestly serving. Now, it's not to make people feel bad. It's, okay, so we look at this parish and we say, well, this is where we were. Now, let's build on it. We don't need to do everything. Here's where this chart also comes in handy. When you do have those town hall meetings, someone's like, I think we need to have another Bible study, or we should do Bishop Bob Barron's, another CD or whatever. Well, if I'm looking at this board and I'm saying, I don't want to be rude, but we're pretty heavy in catechesis. I'm not so sure it's more catechesis is where we really need to spend our priorities, right? Now, if you don't have this tool, you're just a bully. You just don't love Jesus. That's what it is. I mean, am I making this up, or am I just
laughing because it's true?
But if you have this, and again, they're not saying that because they're bad people. Most people are visual learners. And so if we have this, we could say, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying I don't know if that should be our highest priority. Clearly, we got to look at some leadership development. Maybe let's even slow down on this because this is harder, but maybe there's some more work in here we should set for the next year. Let's make that our priorities, right? Let's do some of that. Let's go back to that little discipleship cycle and look at some invitations. How do we get more who are kind of involved to push up and get a little further, a little more involved, right? So at the bottom of the chart, when you see that intentional ministry movement, your goal is to get people who are just a little bit involved to get just a little bit more involved. And those who are a little bit more involved to get a little bit more involved again. So that eventually, and those who are really involved, okay, are you ready to take on leadership? And now you're going to take on leadership. And by the way, now you need to train the next set of leaders. And that's what we're trying to do here, right? And that's how you keep you from burning out, is you got to give it away. When you do that, this is what it looks like. You start having, this was a separate parish. We mapped out their stuff. They had a lot of help. Green was what they were going to do in the next 24 months. Blue was what they were going to do in the next 5 years. You don't need to do everything. Let's just pick off a couple low-hanging fruits. Why? So that 2 years from now we can go back to our community and say, we're starting to make a difference. We're doing some things. And this document, this chart that you have before you, becomes a public chart. It shouldn't be kept in your office, which is why we make it a 6-foot board. It's a working document. And you say, we're doing some things. We're getting there. The city council things was the reality. A lot of the needs in the community, your city council already talks about that stuff. You just have to be in the room to hear it. So what the parish decided is we need to have a liaison who's actually going to go to those meetings and find out what's going on in our schools, what's going on in our community. Can we make that a ministry to slowly start addressing advocacy? We don't need to solve it all one. Let's just start making incremental steps and little things. For down here, let's stop fighting sports What if we host a couple 3-on-3 basketball leagues, right? They're going to come because they're going to want to play. For this particular parish, that became a huge deal. Like huge, as in a couple hundred kids started coming for the 3-on-3 tournament. And they got the local high school basketball team to become all the refs, and then eventually they had to get, I say local Catholic college, but it really wasn't local. It was about 30 minutes away. But that basketball team came, and then eventually they got sponsors for, I mean, it became a big deal. But now you have all these kids that are around, and they could be playing basketball anywhere. But now they're going to do it here. And I'm going to get to know all these things. And by the way, when they sign up, now I have a systematic way, a structure to follow up with them. Why? Because when they sign up, I got all their emails. So now I can follow up with them, right? I can stay on their radar. You don't do anything by chance. Everything is deliberate and focused, right? Why? Because it's always about just a little bit. If I can get that kid who keeps driving past our St. Mary's Church to just stop and just come on our property, and even I know it's basketball, and I know that maybe his soul isn't saved yet, but you know what? I got you on property now. That's step one. I got you on my property. And now that I got you on my property, can I get you a little bit more involved? At our parish, when we first started, we opened up a wood shop to try to draw these kids in the garage, and it turns out one of our parishioners was the retired wood shop teacher at the high school. And Joe was his name. We called him Grandpa Joe, and I got Grandpa Joe to come, and I said, we're going to set up a wood shop in the garage. Why? Because I went over to the high school. I had done my homework. I went over to the high school, and I figured out, I said, what are the kids most involved in here? Obviously, athletics was number 1. Fine arts was number 2. Wood shop and metals was number 3. And so I said, okay, sports thing, we'll work on that. And the choirs, I went to our choir director and said, oh my gosh, I got all these kids who are going to join choir. You know, will you help lead them? And truthfully, I didn't have all those kids yet. But I said, I got a commitment that will you lead them? And, oh, well, they won't come. I said, if I get the kids here, will you teach them about liturgical music? And we're going to put some, yeah, absolutely. And I said, then I went and I said, okay, now I need somebody who knows something about music because I don't even know how to read a music note. But I did that, and I went and I asked people who knows somebody that graduated from school with a music degree, and that's how we went. I got a couple people, I didn't know who they were, but I just asked them, and I said, you know what? Your grandma, because I learned from the sales pitch part, right? Your grandma told me to call you, that you would love to help out, that you graduated with a music degree. Nobody says no to grandma, just so you know. And that you would love to do it. And I said, look, I don't need you to do all this stuff. I just don't know anything about music, and we want to get these young people to learn liturgical music. Truth is, it might be 6 months to a year before they ever do anything at the church. But would you help them? Would you gather them together and play a gig? I didn't know what a gig was, but apparently music is a gig. And so they all play these gig things, and they all did their little gig things in the garage. And we ended up having a Catholic garage band that slowly started to form. And I didn't have to do any of it because I don't know anything about music, and I didn't want to, right? So then we went after the wood shop, because the school told me what the kids were involved in. And so now we started a wood shop. We had 32 kids that would show up every Saturday morning to do wood shop in our garage. And again, they could do that anywhere, but they were doing it here. And then all of a sudden I would go to Grandpa Joe and I'd say, Joe, I don't want you doing any proselytizing. Just love these kids, man. A lot of these kids just need to be loved. These kids are getting up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning to come to church, and they're building like cabinets. The only rule we had is whatever they built, Grandpa Joe and his buddies were not allowed to deliver it. The kids had to go deliver it. So they were making stuff for like the battered women's homes and the shelters and stuff. The kids had to deliver it. Now that was my, kind of like, remember I said the mission trip has a target? That was my target. Because I needed the kids to watch the expression on the mother when she gets that bassinet or gets that bookshelf. Because that was a win in my world. That kid who thinks he has nothing to offer was going to see the fruit of his labor. That was the purpose of the wood shop. And so I get him here, and Grandpa Joe would be watching these kids all the time. I say, Joe, give me the list of who are all these people that are coming all the time. You know, and he'd give me the list or whatever, and I'd go over and I'd say, you know, hey, Mark, I said, man, you're always here. Would you do me a favor? I said, we got some of the old ladies, and they're setting up for Christmas, and they're putting and those trees, they're so heavy, and they need some strong boys to go over and help them. Would you just help them? I don't need you to set up, but would you like bring down the stuff from the storeroom and, you know, just do that? Oh yeah, we'll help out. I said, it'll be next Saturday, no big deal. And then I had to go over to the old ladies and say that you're going to let these kids help them out. And so I went over, and I got the old ladies, and I said, look, we all know it's a box you flip upside down and put a drape over the top of it. Everybody knows there's no weight to this thing. But I need you to let the kids go. Why? Because these kids 6 months ago used to drive by our church. Now they're in my garage, and now I need to get them in the church. And so now that I got you in the church, just help them decorate. And do not ask them, well, do you come to church? They don't. And some of these kids are coming from divorced homes. Just love on them. Just love them. And we got them in the church. And all of a sudden I go, Mark, my gosh, you're always around here. And, you really should come. And, we're doing this food drive. And you seem to really like what we're doing here because you're always here. You know that bottom line? That's how you use a tool like this to strategically and systematically build a structure to say, how do I move people along this discipleship continuum? Does that mean that I don't love the Lord because I'm asking kids to do that? No, of course not. Just means that I'm willing to meet them at their level, but I'm not willing to let them stay there. Make sense? So here's what I'd like you to do. We're going to call time out now that you've seen this. We're not going to finish it today because I'm assuming you have a lot going on. I want you to practice by starting to draft out some of the things that are happening at your parish. And when you draft out some of the things that are happening at your parish, there's a couple things that you should consider. One, do you have multiple ethnic groups? You might have to account for that, right? Because we're not here to create the Anglo interpretation of church, right? So we might have to look at that. There are different spiritual and formation needs. Some people do need the Bible study. Some people need a wood shop, right? Does this have to be on site? Everybody thinks we don't have space, we don't have money. Well, does it have to be on site? I mean, can you do it somewhere else? Can you do it at the local coffee shop? Can you do it at a local restaurant? Right? I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be here, especially if you're trying to reach those who are only moderately or not involved. They would actually prefer to not start at your site, right? Are you training the next level of leaders? Think about that, leadership development, because you got to learn to give it away. If you're doing everything at your parish, I'm going to love you enough to tell you you're not leading properly. Seek the evidence for the return on the investment, meaning if what you're putting on your chart, you're writing that down, and boy, we spend a lot of money doing that, and I'm not sure we're actually reaping the return on that, or we spend a lot of time, or that group is always around, but we're not getting people, then flag it. And you're going to have some tough conversations, right? So practice. Take a little bit of time. John, you're not going to remember them all. That's okay. I just want you to practice so that we have a little bit of time so that you say, where would I put something like this? That's why I want you to practice it a little bit now. You can do this with your team. Your pastoral council can help you. Your finance council can help you. If you have a staff, use your staff. Okay? So let's take a little bit and just call time out and practice this. If you would give them a table at the booth for the volunteer fair, they should be on the board. Right? If you have groups like Scouts who have no official affiliation with you but rent space from you, happens in some parishes, I would let the group dialogue should they really. Here's my rule of thumb. I don't know if it's right or wrong. Here's my rule of thumb. If an incident happens that the media would want to get a hold of it, would they say that it's a St. Mary's function or not? And if they would say yes, then it should be on the board. May not be the best way to do it, but that's how I always say, look, if something happens at the event, are they going to blame Father? And if they blame Father, it should be on the board. Yeah. If it's parish related and we're not getting into politics and stuff here, but you know what I'm saying? So that's how I kind of always judge what makes the board and what doesn't make the board. Yeah.
I noticed in the example that the celebration of Mass and confessions were not listed under prayer and worship. Is there a reason for removing those?
They should have been. Let's see here. Let me pull it up.
First reconciliation was mentioned.
It's listed as liturgical ministers. 4 choirs accompany us. I'm trying to read it. It's a little blurry here. Church environment, yeah. So I personally would add, I think that's good pointing it out. I personally would add, the masses and maybe even, depending upon your parish, you might even have to break it up because some liturgies have a whole different flavor to it, right? So you got to do what's right. But they listed the liturgical ministers, but you might want to break that out even more and put it on there. Same with retreat movements or reconciliations, parish-wide reconciliations, Lenten, all that stuff. I personally would put it all on there. Great question. Yeah?
I'm getting a little confused in terms of the chart.
Okay?
You've got age groupings, you've got activities.
Yes.
Saying if you got electors are mostly in their 50s, is that, you're kind of saying that with that chart?
At this particular parish, that's what they said that they have. When they're being truthful, the lectors at their parish are not children, they're not young adults, they are in their 50s and 60s. And they said they're not even senior citizens at this particular parish.
But if you had lectors in every age group, would you put lectors?
Yes. Yes. So something can go north-south in multiple boxes, they just can't go east-west. So, but for that particular parish, they said, if we're being truthful, we really don't have young people. We want young people, we just don't have any. Great question, though. Any other questions about this? It's a big task. I mean, it's not something that, first of all, this is not something that you should do by yourself. In fact, I'm going to argue it's absolutely not something you should do by yourself. I think your voice is needed in it, but this is a team project. This would make a great staff meeting. This would make a great staff meeting, or 2, or 3, right? To make sure you have everything. Because once you do that, and once you see the picture of this is what it means for our parish, now we can do something about it. Now the pastoral council looks at it and says, okay, now I'm starting to understand what we're doing and where all this money is going, and now I can plan according. The finance council sees where the money's going, not just has a list of all these things, right? So that when the youth minister comes to them with a budget and, we want another $3,000. What for? Well, we're going to do basketball leagues. Well, I'm not paying $3,000 for a basketball. No, you don't understand. It's part of the bigger plan. Because, see, this idea that you can go and get kids to come to the church in a bubble, separate from church life, is a fallacy. You will never do it. Young people are drawn to the parish community. If the parish community is struggling, so will the young people. Just so you know. And so that's why it has to all be done together. But now you have a tool to do that. And it's not fathers just being mean. No, actually, the community actually did this. I didn't do it. Take some pressure off of you. Right? But this is the truth of who you are. Now go become what you want to become. Pray over it, discern over it. Lord, where are you leading us? And let's dream big. And then, because there's multiple steps in this process, right? Because after we do that, and once we have truth serum, what we do in our coaching process is we make everybody put numbers behind all these, right? So that we can ballpark, percentage-wise, how many are we actually reaching, if we're being truthful? Because some people are going to put something up on the board, and there's 2 people that are going to that. Well, when it's just a name on a board, it looks like we've got that taken care of. If you have to be truthful and say, okay, but the reality is there's really 2 people who do that. Well, that changes the whole picture of that chart. Right? So then the next step then is, are there any fatted calves that need to be slaughtered on this chart? Do we have to do some pruning on this chart? And that's a community-wide discernment and conversation. Or, as you pointed out, maybe we don't need to kill some of these things. Maybe they need to be reframed. Maybe they've wavered from what they were originally to do. So an example I often use is like the Knights of Columbus. Where would you put Knights of Columbus? I have community, I have education. Where would you put Knights of Columbus?
In my parish, they've got their own building and they don't do anything with the parish.
Okay.
Depends on the Knights.
Leadership, it absolutely depends on the Knights Council. So at your place, you'd put them in all these places, right? If I went to the Knights of Columbus in Connecticut, where would they put it? They would put it under social justice. Why? What is the mission of the Knights of Columbus? It is a male fraternal service organization, correct? And so they would say it. But the lived reality is, we at our local place, based upon the local reality, might put it in everything you just said, right? Now you have the opportunity to do what you were starting to allude to say, okay, we put it over there because that's what it is, but that's actually not what it was designed for. So have we wavered from the original mission? And now is an opportunity. Look, we're not picking on you. It's just, let's be truthful here, right? And we can then use that vehicle the way it was intended to grow the kingdom. So that's like step 3 into the process, though. There is a step 4 and 5 too, by the way. But do you see how doing this work on the front end could really, when you're doing your budgets, can you imagine how much easier this makes your budgets? When you're planning for future growth, can you imagine how much easier this can make your process? When you can see what it is that you're building towards. Do you want to know that when you see this and you have this next chart and the community can see where you're going, do you know how much more excited, do you know how much easier it is to do a stewardship talk when they see this screen? Because they see where we're going? As opposed to, we just see more because we got to go get the kids. Well, what does that mean? Well, you know, we're losing kids, so we got to go get some more kids. As opposed to, no, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to go after this, to do this, to get this result. That inspires people. That inspires people. Make sense? We got just a couple minutes left here. For the good of the group, is there any just basic questions? There's no way we could cover all this in one day, and I knew that. Yes?
In our lived experience of smaller places where everybody knows everybody, to get 4 couples that will mentor someone, you know, from birth on, it can be difficult. You know, I know them, I don't want them to know this about me. How do you combat that overall premise of, you know, well, we just know each other too well, we can't get involved in that?
Yeah, I wouldn't have neighbors do it, right? And it's not from birth forever, right? It's just, I mean, and that's part of the dialogue locally. But everybody in the county or in the entire town, I've done a lot of work in small town America. It's a little oversimplified to say everybody knows a lot of people's faces. They may not necessarily know each other, or they know what they think they know about each other, right? Which is a different issue. But when you are in a town of, say, a couple hundred people, the reality is that a lot of people do know who they are. Now, there's also an advantage to that. Because in those towns of 200, family atmosphere actually still means something. Unlike a city of Chicago where you don't know anyone, right? And so that's a dialogue. And in that particular case, I would ask the community, look, we want to support these marriages. What do we need to do? This isn't a second version of confession. That's not what the purpose of these groups are. The purpose of these groups are, look, I just want to help. I want to set it. Isn't that the same as what a sponsor is in baptism and confirmation? It's an extra set of hands to help you on this journey. And so have some of that conversation. Now, most people are actually afraid to do it because what would I say? Why don't you say anything? Have dinner with them. Just talk. It'll come out on its own. You don't have to script this. Like, just be a human being. Check in with them. Give them a hug on occasion. It'll happen all on its own. It'll happen organically. And so overcoming that. But that's, again, I go back to the board and say, but here's why we're doing it. We defend marriages. Not on television, not in a newspaper. We defend marriages. Therefore, if we defend marriages, we are going to do absolutely everything we can to make sure this marriage wins. I want you celebrating your golden anniversary. What do we need to do to make sure every single couple that gets married this summer has a golden anniversary? That's the conversation we should be having at the parish. Right?
The ways of piercing through those fears or lived experience.
And now you're back to, so change management, you got to have the awareness. You got to have the awareness, and you got to start talking about, should we really do something? And you work your way through those 5 steps.
And basically, we have a lot of people that are uninvolved, but they're probably inbound into the county because it's kind of a place people come when they retire. We don't know where they're at, or we don't. How do we find them to? They're not really registered, but they're Catholic and they're out there.
Yeah. So I'm going to say this in a pastoral way. There are some things we can do there. My personal bias, it's not because I don't want to reach all these people. I think there's so much work to do in-house that before we start talking about people who are not even connected in our parish, we should probably get our own house in order first. Because before I invite somebody to come into this community, I need to make sure the community is cleaned up first. Right? And it's not because I'm anti anybody. I mean, we can do some communication things and webs and, webinars and videos and all. We can do that kind of stuff. But my primary attention is if we can get this right, the others will be drawn, and we know biblically speaking it'll be because of the way that we treat each other and behave that they'll all start coming because the YMCA talk is going to bring them. But we got to get our own house in order first. So that's how I don't know if that helps or not, but as far as how do you reach those who are uninvolved and are registered, we're actually working on that right now. I'm praying, and if you know of a good donor, we have access now to software. And I told the Lord, okay, Lord, you gave this to me. Now you got to fund it. He will. We need $15,000 to fund this software. This software will take your entire parish. I'll take your database. We'll be able to plug it right into the software. I can map your entire parish, and I can color code who's active, who's inactive. I can put it into an 8-house grid so that you can literally create little block captains so that you can have people in the neighborhood all in connection. And furthermore, I can give you a 100-page report based on all of the U.S. Census, the CARA data, the Pew studies. There's 5 sources that it comes from on how people think, act, and believe in your zip code. And we want to provide that to all of our parishes, but I need $15,000 to do it. So I just told the Lord, make it happen, because that's a game changer for parishes. And all it is global positioning software. That your city managers have been using it for years. I want to use it in the church. And I found somebody who knows how to do it because he's a computer geek and he talks language I don't get. I said, you talk your language. I just need the result. That's all I care about. Skip all your little HTML codes. I don't care about that stuff. I just need the result. And what do I need to do to get that result? Because if we can provide that to parishes, that's an absolute game changer. And then when you get new families move in to the school, to the parish, you just click on the little map and say, oh, they live 3 doors down from the Smith family. I'm going to call the Smith family. Hey, the Joneses came to visit us. Would you go down, 3 doors down and just say hi to them? That's a game changer. That's changing the way that we do evangelization. But you need the tools to do it. So if you know if somebody's got $15,000, give me a call. And we'll provide it free for your parish. And that's the thing here. So there you go. That's my not so subtle request. I hope this has been helpful. We can't solve everything. We're given a little snippet. The one thing I did want to put out there, because John had mentioned it to me, and I don't know where it's going to go. You know that this is what we do. We coach parishes. One of the things that John had tossed out to me is this notion of would we help your diocese and create a couple cohorts. We're doing this for the Diocese of Belleville, just a couple dioceses over from you, on the other side of St. Louis, where actually next week I'll be with them. We have 10 parishes right now that we're only working with a group of 10. And they're large, small, rural, urban. One is all African American in East St. Louis, and one is in O'Fallon, which is the most expensive, wealthiest area, right? And everything in between. And so would we be willing to come and do the same thing here for parishes that are interested? And I said, I'd be open to that conversation. We don't have a plan right now. We don't have a start date, because we're not even sure that there's interest to do it. But if there's interest to do it, I would ask you to maybe touch base with John after, or someone in your office, or do you have a game plan for this? Or I'm conscious of the time, and I'm conscious Delta wants me to leave.
I am. The game plan is the first step was really gauging interest. I wanted to bring Rich in today to get a flavor of what we mean when we talk about this intentional ministry model, especially for growing parishes, and how youth ministry fits into that. I just wanted you to hear some of these strategies and approaches. And so what I hope to do is follow up with this group afterwards. I'll send you the slides. I'll send you the link to the full video recording to pass along to whoever you want in your parishes. And I'll send just a link to a very short survey where you can let me know that you attended, because some people on my list didn't come today. Some people, my list doesn't match necessarily who's in the room. And on that survey, you can let me know the level to which you'd like to follow up. Some of you might be sitting in here today and say, I'd just like to kind of have a follow-up meeting with you at some point to talk about some of the things that came up today. What does an apprenticeship model of youth ministry look like versus a PS? That can be something I can help you with. Or what are those terms across the top? That's what I'm working. This chart, a little modified, but this chart is something I'm working very closely with ladies and youth ministers on to help them understand that framework, that model that the church has. So we can do some of that stuff. You might also be in a position where you say, I like some of the things, I want to go a little deeper in my parish, and I would be interested in possibly signing on to a small cohort to work with my office, to work with Mr. Curran in the year ahead on doing some of this stuff more strategically in my location. If you're leaving here today and you're feeling like you might be in that boat, not all of you might not want to take any further steps. That's something I'd like to gauge interest in. The next step for me then is to be able to present something to Bishop McKnight and say, we had this seminar, this is what we discussed. There's a level of interest in forming a cohort to go a little bit deeper in some of the strategic ministry modeling. Let's talk through what that might look like. And after he may give it his seal of approval, then I can come back to those interested parties and say, here's the plan going forward. We want to, it might be something like we want to commit for a year to meet periodically in our parish to go more into how we do this. Because this is where I feel like my office really needs to help support you in ministering to your youth, your families in this. As I said in my opening comments, you want me to come in and help you get a youth group started? Fine, I can do that. That's important. Or take a bunch of kids to NCYC? Fine, that's important. But that's ultimately not going to evangelize them to the point that we're talking about, to grow the church and re-engage this generation. We really got to start working more structurally and strategically at the parish level and diocesan level. So that's kind of where my mind is going with this. I hope it's not a one and done sort of thing. Questions or concerns about that?
When you talk about a cohort, what would that look like?
It might be 5 parishes who say we're ready to work a little bit more strategically together, and so we would maybe work on a calendar. Maybe you commit for a year. I don't know what you're doing in other dioceses.
Yeah, so real quick, let me tell you what Belleville's doing. It's not the perfect model, but that's what they want to do. So in Belleville right now we have a cohort. There's 8 parishes, and we're going to start a second one next year. Another 8 parishes at Bishop's request. And so we meet 6 times a year, about every other month. And we go on site. So during those times, what we're going to do as we start this next session is wherever you're located, we'll come out to you. So we, on our end, may be in the diocese 3 days or 4 days or whatever number of days we have to be here. And during that time, we'll go out, try to map it if we can somehow, and be maybe a day here, or some cases we have to be in an evening because you don't have a staff, you got all volunteers, so we'll book an evening with you, and then the next day go somewhere else. So we're there 3-4 days, and then one of those times, we actually want to bring everybody together in one space. So it's about 6 sessions, then in between, we do a phone call or video call, depending upon what your capabilities are. Just check-ins and kind of, okay, that was your now there's homework in between. And my job is to not be the nice guy. My job is to say, no, okay, this is 2 months. And you keep telling me, well, there's all this stuff keeps coming up. We're either serious or we're not. What do we need to do to overcome that obstacle? So that's our job to kind of keep the pressure on so that your parish can see the progress you're making. So that's what a cohort is.
Right. And again, we want to make that, if that is something that formulates, we want to make it as cost effective for everyone. But we don't know that until we have an interest level and some next steps in place. Good. Other questions about how this relates to youth ministry?
While you talk, can I just say thank you, and I don't take it personal that I have to wrap up. I'm just conscious in 3.5 hours there's a plane that's taking off, and if I'm not on it, I'm here till Monday. And I got to go to St. Louis and return a car and get through TSA in 3.5 hours. So on rush hour on a Friday. So Lord, you know that movie when he just, what is it?
Should we all just, you got to...
Yeah, just put, yeah, there you go. Yeah, just part the highways there, and I'll get there. But anyway, so don't take it personal. I'm not being rude if I need to cut out and get out of here. But it's thoroughly been fun on my end. I love, obviously, if you can't tell, I love doing what I do. If there's anything I can help, regardless of whether there's a cohort or follow-up or not, if there's anything that you need, just call me. Just call me. If I can't help you doing what I do, I probably know somebody who could, right? And I'll connect you and network you with whoever, okay? But I hope today's been good. If you want any of this, I'm going to send the slides to John, and then he can disperse it out to all of you. So if you didn't get it, blame him. But thanks for your time. Some of you I know have traveled a great distance. Thank you for coming out. I hope it was helpful to you, and God willing, our paths will cross again. Okay?